A cold wind pressed against the cracked windows of Miller's diner, carrying with it the faint hum of a city that hadn't quite woken up yet. The sky outside was a dull gray, heavy with clouds that refused to let the sun through. Inside, the diner smelled of burnt coffee, buttered toast, and long hours. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly, fighting the gloom. The booths were empty except for one in the far corner. The one next to the window everyone avoided. That booth belonged to an old woman who came every morning without fail, as faithful as the sunrise. Her name was Eleanor Hayes. Eleanor was always dressed the same, a long black coat, a knitted scarf faded from years of use, and a silver brooch shaped like a feather pinned to her collar. Her hair was the pale white of snow, tied neatly behind her head, and her hands trembled slightly when she lifted her teacup. She carried the kind of sadness that didn't cry out loud, the quiet kind, the one that sits behind your eyes and never really leaves. The only person who ever seemed to notice her was Mara Weaver, a 26-year-old waitress with tired eyes but an unbroken heart. Mara moved through the diner with practiced grace, coffee pot in one hand, notepad in the other, smiling at customers who barely looked up from their phones. She wasn't like the other waitresses who worked only for the paycheck. Mara worked because she needed to believe the world still had small pockets of goodness. Her life had never been easy. Orphaned at 12, shuffled between foster homes that saw her more as a burden than a child, she learned early that kindness was not something the world handed out freely. At 16, she aged out of the system and had to build her life from scratch. She rented a one-room apartment with peeling paint and a leaking roof, worked double shifts, and still managed to smile at strangers. Her co-workers often asked how she stayed so positive, but the truth was, she didn't know. Maybe she smiled because she didn't know what else to do, and every morning, when she saw Eleanor sitting alone in that corner booth, something in her chest ached a little. There was something familiar about that loneliness, something she recognized from her own reflection. It started small, a refill of tea without charging for it, a plate of toast, still warm instead of cold. The first time Mara brought Eleanor an extra muffin, the old woman tried to refuse. "I didn't order that," Eleanor said softly, embarrassed. Mara smiled and said, "It's part of a diner promotion, customer appreciation thing." Eleanor looked at her skeptically but didn't argue. She thanked Mara in a voice so fragile it could break. They both knew the promotion didn't exist. Day after day, their silent friendship grew. Mara learned that Eleanor loved reading by lamplight and that she used to live near the ocean. She would talk about the sound of waves hitting rocks, about a little white house she once had, about laughter that used to fill her life. But whenever Mara asked about her family, a shadow passed over Eleanor's face, and she'd quietly change the subject. In turn, Eleanor learned about Mara's life, how her car broke down months ago, how she walked home in the cold to save bus fare, how she wanted to study nursing one day but couldn't afford it. Eleanor listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes smiling faintly, and always tipping Mara a few coins more than she could probably spare. Then came the morning that changed everything. The rain that day fell hard and cold, drumming against the diner windows like restless fingers. When Eleanor walked in, she looked smaller than usual, her coat soaked through, her eyes swollen and red. Mara hurried over with a towel and a warm cup of tea. "Rough morning?" she asked gently. Eleanor hesitated, then whispered, They evicted me. I have nowhere to go tonight." Mara froze. "Nowhere?" Eleanor nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. "I'll stay at the bus station tonight." It's warm there at least, Mara didn't think. She didn't weigh consequences or costs. She simply said, "You're not sleeping at a bus station. You're coming home with me." Eleanor blinked. "No, I couldn't." "Yes, you can," Mara said firmly. "Just for a few days, until we figure something out." That night after closing, Mara walked Eleanor through the rain to her tiny apartment. It was small but warm. She gave Eleanor her bed and took the couch for herself. The old woman cried quietly that night when she thought Mara couldn't hear her. Over the next week, they settled into an easy rhythm. Mara cooked simple meals, shared her groceries, and made Eleanor tea before work. They laughed sometimes, though both of them carried wounds that laughter could only briefly cover. Eleanor would insist on helping around the apartment, folding laundry, sweeping floors, even mending Mara's torn uniform. One night, Eleanor watched Mara reading an old library book by the dim glow of a lamp. "Why do you do it?" she asked suddenly. Mara looked up. "Do what? Help me." "You barely know me," Mara smiled. "Because no one helped me when I needed it most. I guess I just decided I'd be the person I used to pray would show up." Eleanor looked down, her lips trembling. "You're a rare soul, Mara Weaver," Mara shrugged. "Just a stubborn one. But kindness, no matter how quiet, leaves an echo." One morning, Mara came home from work to find the apartment empty. Eleanor's things were gone. The bed was made perfectly, and on the pillow lay a folded note. Mara's hands shook as she opened it. "Thank you for giving me back hope." It read, "Eleanor, no address. No forwarding contact. Just that one line." Mara stood frozen, the note trembling in her hands. For weeks she searched, called shelters, hospitals, even the police, but no one had seen her. Eventually she had to let go. Still, she kept the note tucked in her wallet, a reminder that kindness was never wasted, even if it ended in heartbreak. A month passed. Winter came. The diner felt quieter without Eleanor's presence in the corner booth. Then, one gray Tuesday morning, everything changed again. It was slow that day. Only a few regulars sipping coffee and reading newspapers. Mara was wiping down tables when a sudden silence fell across the diner. Outside, 3 black SUVs had pulled up, their engines idling. 4 men in dark suits stepped out, followed by 2 others carrying leather briefcases. The bell above the door jingled as they entered. Conversation stopped. The air grew still. One of the men, tall, confident, clearly used to command, scanned the diner and said, "Is there a Mara Weaver here?" Mara looked up, startled. "That's me, Miss Weaver," the man said politely. "We've been instructed to escort you. Please come with us." "Escort me? Why? What's going on?" "You'll understand shortly," he replied. Her co-workers exchanged uneasy glances. "You didn't do anything, did you?" one whispered. Mara shook her head, terrified. But something deep inside, something she couldn't name, told her to go. She untied her apron, grabbed her coat, and followed them outside. The drive took nearly 40 minutes, moving from the worn edges of the city into a world of manicured lawns and towering iron gates. When the SUV finally stopped, Mara stared out the window in disbelief. The mansion before her looked like something out of a dream, vast, elegant, surrounded by gardens dusted with snow. A bodyguard opened her door as if she were royalty. Inside, the air smelled faintly of roses and polished wood. A soft piano played somewhere in the distance. The floors gleamed, the walls lined with portraits and gold frames. "This way," one of the men said. They led her through a long hallway to a sunlit room overlooking the gardens. The curtains swayed gently, and in the center of the room, sitting by a grand window, was a woman Mara thought she'd never see again. "Hello." "Dear," said Eleanor Hayes, dressed in lavender silk, her hair styled perfectly, her eyes bright and full of warmth. Mara gasped. "Eleanor?" Eleanor smiled. "Please, sit!" Mara's knees felt weak. "I don't understand. What is this place? What's going on?" Eleanor took a deep breath. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." And then she began. Her name wasn't just Eleanor Hayes, it was Eleanor M. Hayes. Widow of the late Charles Hayes, founder of Hayes International, one of the largest private investment firms in the country. She was wealthy beyond imagination. Estates, businesses, assets spread across continents. But none of it mattered after tragedy struck. 2 years earlier, her husband and her only son were killed in a car accident. The grief consumed her. The mansion became unbearable, the wealth meaningless. She vanished from the public eye, leaving her company in the hands of lawyers and trustees. She needed to know, truly know, if kindness still existed in a world that seemed so hollow. "So," she said softly, "I disappeared. I gave away my jewelry, sold my car, and walked into a world where no one knew me. I wanted to live like a nobody, to see if compassion could find me without money leading the way. She looked at Mara with tears in her eyes. And it did. It found me in a small diner with a young woman who didn't ask for anything, who shared what little she had, who offered warmth without reason. You didn't save me from poverty, Mara. You saved me from despair. Mara's eyes filled with tears. Eleanor, I thought you were gone. I thought something happened to you. Eleanor smiled gently. Something did. I remembered what it means to be human again. Because of you. She reached across the table and held Mara's hands. I don't need a nurse. I don't need an employee. I need a heart I can trust. I want you by my side, not as a worker, but as family. Everything I have will one day be yours, not out of duty, but out of love. Because you reminded me that kindness still exists. Mara's tears came freely now. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Eleanor whispered. Say you'll stay. Mara nodded, unable to speak. From that day forward, Mara's life transformed. She moved into the mansion not as a servant, but as a companion and confidant. Together, she and Eleanor rebuilt the Hayes Foundation. But this time, its mission was simple: to help women like Mara, the forgotten ones, the struggling ones, the ones who just needed a chance. They opened shelters, funded education programs, and built a new home for the homeless called Mara's Haven. Every day, Mara worked alongside Eleanor, never once losing her humility. She refused luxury for luxury's sake, choosing instead to use it to heal others. Years passed. Seasons changed. The mansion that once felt like a tomb became a place filled with laughter, warmth, and purpose. When Eleanor passed peacefully in her sleep one spring morning, she left a letter on her bedside table addressed to Mara. It read, My dearest Mara, you once gave me a home when I had none. Now I leave you mine. But more than wealth, I leave you a promise, to keep giving hope where there is none. You reminded me that love and kindness are what make us truly rich. Thank you for saving my life when you didn't even know it needed saving. With all my love, Eleanor. Mara wept for hours, clutching the letter to her heart. She honored that promise for the rest of her life. Every Christmas, she would return to Miller's Diner. She'd sit in the same corner booth Eleanor once did, order tea and dry toast, and leave a thick envelope for the waitresses with a small note inside for the next Eleanor who walks in. Because Mara Weaver never forgot that the simplest act of kindness, a warm plate, a gentle word, a quiet gesture, can change everything. And sometimes, it takes just one moment of compassion to turn a stranger into family, to turn loneliness into love, and to remind the world that no one is ever truly forgotten. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it, because somewhere out there someone is waiting for a kindness that only you can give.